The silent cry. The vastness of space held many secrets, but none quite like the one that would change the galaxy forever. In the outer reaches of the Andali sector, where stars burned dim and civilizations rarely ventured, something stirred in the darkness. It began as a whisper. A faint electronic pulse that rippled through the cosmic void like a stone dropped into still water. Commander Sarah Chen sat in the captain's chair of the human exploration vessel Horizon's Edge, reviewing routine patrol reports. The ship was small by military standards, designed for deep space reconnaissance rather than combat. Its crew of 43 represented humanity's commitment to exploring the unknown, even in regions where the Galactic Council deemed presence unnecessary. The bridge was quiet that cycle, with only the soft hum of engines and the occasional beep of sensors breaking the silence. Sarah had grown accustomed to the peaceful monotony of deep space patrol. Humanity had been part of the galactic community for only 50 years, still considered newcomers by species that measured their histories in millennia. The Council often assigned human vessels to the frontier regions, the forgotten corners of space where nothing of importance ever happened, until now. Lieutenant Torres, the communications officer, suddenly straightened in his seat. His fingers danced across the console as his expression shifted from boredom to confusion, then to concern. Sarah noticed the change immediately. Years of command had taught her to read her crew's body language as easily as she read sensor displays. Torres turned to face her, his voice uncertain. "Commander, I'm picking up something strange. It's a distress signal, but the pattern is unlike anything in our database." Sarah rose from her chair and moved to his station. The display showed a series of pulsing waves, irregular and desperate in their rhythm. Origin? Unknown sector, approximately 3 light-years from our current position. The signal is weak and deteriorating. Whatever is sending it won't last much longer. Dr. James Morrison, the ship's xenobiologist and senior science officer, appeared at Sarah's elbow. His curiosity was evident in the way he leaned toward the screen, his eyes scanning the data with practiced efficiency. "That's not a standard galactic distress code. The frequency suggests an older technology, possibly pre-Council era." Sarah made her decision quickly. "Set course for the signal source. Maximum velocity." Torres, try to clean up that transmission. "I want to know what we're dealing with." The Horizon's Edge changed course, its engines flaring brighter as it accelerated toward the unknown. The crew moved with practiced efficiency, each member falling into their role without hesitation. This was what they had trained for, what humanity excelled at, responding to crisis with immediate action. As they drew closer, the signal grew stronger, but no clearer. It was as if whoever was transmitting lacked the power to maintain a coherent message. Torres worked tirelessly to filter out the interference, his frustration mounting with each failed attempt. "Commander," he finally said, "I think I've got something. It's fragmentary, but I can make out a few words." The bridge fell silent as Torres played the transmission. Through the static and distortion, a voice emerged. It was high-pitched and melodic, carrying tones that human ears found alien yet strangely beautiful. The ship's translation system struggled with the language before finally producing words. "Fleeing. No weapons. Children dying. Please. Anyone. Help." The message repeated 3 times before dissolving back into static. Sarah felt her chest tighten. The desperation in that voice transcended species and language. It was the sound of a people facing extinction. "How long until we reach them?" she asked quietly. 18 hours at current speed," replied the helmsman. Sarah nodded. "Send a message back. Tell them help is coming. Then open a channel to Galactic Council Command. They need to know about this." The transmission to the Council took 3 hours to reach the nearest relay station, and another 2 for a response. When it came, Sarah found herself staring at the holographic image of Counselor Vex, a tall, crystalline being whose species had been part of the galactic community for over 10,000 years. "Commander Chen," Vex's translated voice carried the cold precision typical of his kind. "Your report has been reviewed. The Council advises against interference in this matter." Sarah blinked in surprise. "Counselor, we're talking about refugees. The signal clearly indicates they're under attack and have no means of defense. The sector you describe is outside Council jurisdiction. Moreover, our records indicate that region was home to several primitive civilizations that refused Council membership. Their fate, while unfortunate, is not our concern." "Not your concern?" Sarah felt anger rising in her voice. They're asking for help. Basic humanitarian principles. Commander, Vex interrupted, his tone remaining unchanged. Humanity is still learning the complexities of galactic politics. Not every species that broadcasts distress is worthy of aid. Some bring destruction upon themselves. Others use such signals as traps. The Council's position is clear. Maintain your current patrol route and ignore the transmission. The hologram flickered and died before Sarah could respond. She stood in the center of the bridge, her crew watching her with anticipation. They all knew what the Council had ordered. They also knew their commander well enough to suspect what would happen next. Sarah took a deep breath. Maintain current course. We're going to help them. Commander. Her first officer, Lieutenant Commander Park, spoke carefully. Disobeying a direct council order could mean court-martial, the end of your career. Sarah turned to face him, her expression calm but determined. Then I'll face that when it comes. Right now, there are people out there who need help, and we're the only ones in position to provide it. I joined the fleet to explore and protect, not to ignore those in need because of political convenience. Park's serious expression broke into a slight smile. Yes, ma'am. I just wanted to make sure you knew what you were doing. I always know what I'm doing, Commander. Doesn't mean I always know if it's the right thing, but I know what it is. The crew returned to their tasks with renewed energy. There was something uniquely human about what they were doing, a characteristic that other species found both admirable and frustrating. Humans had a tendency to act first and consider consequences later, especially when they believed lives were at stake. 16 hours later, the horizon's edge dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the distress signal's origin point. What they found there would haunt Sarah's dreams for years to come. Floating in the darkness were dozens of ships, if they could even be called that. They were little more than hulls held together with desperate repairs and sheer willpower. Some were venting atmosphere. Others drifted dead in space, their power systems long since failed. And surrounding them all was debris, the scattered remains of vessels that hadn't survived whatever catastrophe had befallen this fleet. Life signs? Sarah asked quietly. Dr. Morrison worked his console, his face growing pale. Detecting approximately 30,000 individuals across the surviving vessels. Most readings are weak. They're dying, Commander. Open a channel. All frequencies. Torres nodded. Channel open. This is Commander Sarah Chen of the human vessel Horizon's Edge. We received your distress call. We're here to help. Please respond. For a long moment, there was only silence. Then crackling through the speakers came a voice. The same melodic tone they'd heard in the original distress signal, but now filled with disbelief and hope. You came? We did not think. The Council turned us away. They said we were already dead. Why would you come for the dead? Sarah felt emotion catch in her throat. Because you're not dead yet. And as long as there's life, there's hope. What happened here? Who are you fleeing from? The voice belonged to Ambassador Krell, as he would later introduce himself. He was the leader of the Valine, a species of gentle, luminescent beings who had lived in peaceful isolation for thousands of years. Their mistake had been simple. They possessed a resource that the Kragath Empire wanted. The Kragath were conquerors, a species that believed might made right and that all other races existed only to serve or be destroyed. When the Valine refused to surrender their world, the Kragath responded with overwhelming force. Orbital bombardments had cracked the planet's crust. Biological weapons had poisoned the atmosphere. In a matter of weeks, a civilization of billions had been reduced to the 30,000 survivors now drifting in makeshift vessels. The Kragath pursue us still, Krell explained, his voice heavy with exhaustion and grief. We carry the last children of our species. We thought if we could reach Council space, they might offer sanctuary, but the Council refused us entry. They said accepting us would mean war with the Kragath, and such a war was not worth fighting for our sake. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. The cold calculation of it infuriated her. Lives weighed against political convenience and found wanting. How long until the Kragath catch up with you? She asked. There was a pause before Krell answered. Our sensors detect their fleet approaching. They will be here within 2 of your hours. Commander, you should leave. Your small vessel cannot stand against them. We thank you for your kindness in these final moments, but there is no reason for you to die with us. Sarah looked around her bridge. Her crew met her gaze, and in their eyes she saw the same determination she felt. Humanity might be new to the galaxy, might be seen as primitive by ancient civilizations, but they had brought something with them into space that seemed to have been lost among the stars. The simple conviction that some things were worth fighting for, regardless of the cost. Dr. Morrison, start coordinating with the Valine ships. I want a full assessment of their conditions and needs. Torres, send a priority message on all human frequencies. Use the old code from the colony days. Torres looked up, recognition dawning on his face. The Sanctuary Protocol? Yes. It hasn't been used since the Mars colony crisis, but if there was ever a time to invoke it, this is it. The Sanctuary Protocol was simple in its premise, but profound in its implications. Any human vessel encountering refugees in distress had the authority to offer protection and call for reinforcement from any and all available human forces. It bypassed normal chains of command, cut through bureaucratic red tape, and demanded an immediate response. More importantly, it represented a promise that humanity would stand between the helpless and those who would harm them, regardless of the odds. The message went out, encoded in a pattern that every human ship would recognize. It contained their coordinates, the situation, and a simple declaration. Sanctuary offered. Protection required. Respond with all haste. Message transmitted, Commander. Torres confirmed. Though I should mention the nearest human fleet is at least 20 hours away. Then we hold for 20 hours, Sarah said simply. She turned to face Ambassador Krell's image on the view screen. Ambassador, humanity accepts your people into our protection. We will defend you until reinforcements arrive or until our ship is destroyed. We do not abandon those who seek our help. Krell's luminescent form seemed to brighten, colors swirling across his translucent skin, in patterns that Dr. Morrison's database identified as expressions of profound gratitude and disbelief. Commander, this is madness. You will die for us. We are strangers to you. Sarah smiled, though there was steel beneath it. Ambassador, there's an old saying from Earth. We're all strangers until we decide we're not. Your people asked for help. My people answered. That's all that matters now. The next hour was spent in frantic preparation. The Horizon's Edge was not a warship, but like all human vessels, it had been designed with combat capability in mind. Humanity had learned hard lessons during their expansion into space, lessons written in blood and sacrifice. Every ship carried weapons, and every crew trained for combat, even if they hoped never to use such skills. Dr. Morrison coordinated with the Valine, guiding the strongest of their vessels into a tighter defensive formation around the weakest. The refugees had no weapons, no shields, but they could at least present a smaller target profile. Medical teams stood ready to beam over to the most critical ships and provide aid, though Sarah knew such efforts might prove futile if the Kragath arrived with the force Krell described. As the clock counted down, Sarah found herself standing at the forward viewport, staring out at the refugee fleet. Each of those battered ships carried thousands of lives, people who had watched their world die and now drifted in darkness, hoping for a miracle they had no right to expect. Commander, Lieutenant Park approached quietly. The crew wanted me to tell you something. Whatever happens in the next few hours, they're proud to serve with you. We all knew what we signed up for when we joined the fleet. If we're going to make our stand somewhere, this is as good a place as any. Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice for a moment. Then she turned to face her first officer. Make sure that message is logged in the ship's record. If we don't make it through this, I want people to know why we stayed. Already done, Commander. The sensors began screaming alerts. Torres looked up, his face pale. Commander, multiple contacts emerging from faster-than-light travel. Configuration matches Kragath warships. Count is, I'm reading 47 vessels, ranging from destroyers to battlecruisers. Sarah felt her stomach drop but kept her expression neutral. 47 warships against one exploration vessel. The mathematics of survival were brutally simple and entirely unfavorable. Battle stations, she ordered calmly. All weapons to full power. Shields to maximum. Position us between the Kragath fleet and the refugees, and somebody find me a way to make one small ship look like a much bigger problem. The crew moved with precise urgency. Weapon systems that had never been fired in anger hummed to life. Shield generators, maintained meticulously but rarely tested under combat conditions, wrapped the ship in layers of protective energy. The Horizon's Edge, small and alone, moved to stand between 30,000 helpless refugees and an armada that could crack planets. On the main view screen, the Kragath fleet materialized. Their ships were dark and angular, designed to inspire fear. Each vessel bristled with weapons, their hulls scarred from countless conquests. At the center of the formation loomed a massive dreadnought, easily 10 times the size of the horizon's edge. A transmission came through, harsh and grating even through the translation system. The face that appeared on screen was reptilian, covered in dark scales with eyes that gleamed with cruel intelligence. This was Overlord Thrax, commander of the Kragath hunting fleet. Human vessel, you are interfering in Kragath Imperial business. The Valine are marked for extermination. Withdraw immediately or share their fate. Sarah stepped forward, her voice steady despite the fear churning in her gut. This is Commander Sarah Chen of the Human Alliance. The Valine have requested sanctuary and we have granted it. Any attack on them will be considered an attack on humanity. I suggest you reconsider your course of action. Thrax's laughter was a horrible sound, like metal scraping against stone. One tiny ship threatens the might of the Empire? Your species' reputation for foolish bravery is well earned. You have 10 of your minutes to withdraw. After that, I will add your wreckage to the debris field. The transmission cut off. Sarah turned to her crew. Well, we tried diplomacy. Now we prepare for the alternative. The next 10 minutes felt like an eternity. The crew worked in focused silence, each person knowing their role might be the difference between survival and annihilation. Sarah moved through the bridge, offering quiet words of encouragement, checking readiness, and praying to any gods that might be listening that the sanctuary protocol message had reached someone. Anyone who could help. The timer reached 0. The Kragath fleet advanced, weapons powering up with malevolent energy. Sarah watched them come, calculating distances and angles, looking for any advantage their single ship might exploit. There was none. This was going to be a matter of holding out as long as possible, of making the Kragath pay for every second they survived. Incoming fire, Torres shouted. The space around the horizon's edge erupted with plasma bolts and missile trails. The small ship darted and weaved, its shields flaring brilliant blue as they absorbed impacts that would have vaporized an unprotected vessel. Sarah gripped her armrests, calling out orders in a calm voice that belied the chaos around them. Return fire, full spread. Target their sensor arrays and communication systems. Make them work to coordinate their attack. The horizon's edge struck back, its weapons far less impressive than the Kragath arsenal but guided by human precision. Missiles found weak points in enemy shields. Beam weapons scored hits on exposed sensor clusters. It was like a mouse biting at a pack of wolves, but even wolves could bleed. Shields holding at 70%, Park reported. We can't sustain this for long. Sarah knew he was right. Already she could feel the ship shuddering under repeated impacts. The Kragath were toying with them, using only a fraction of their fleet to attack while the rest maintained formation. It was a display of contempt, a message that humanity was beneath their notice. Then something changed. Torres suddenly sat bolt upright, his hand going to his earpiece. His face transformed, desperation giving way to shock, then to something that looked almost like joy. Commander, I'm detecting massive energy signatures. Multiple faster-than-light transitions, 90 contacts, 100. Commander, they're still coming. Sarah felt her heart leap. IF signatures? Torres grinned broadly. Human, Commander. They're all human. Space itself seemed to tear open as the cavalry arrived. Ship after ship burst into normal space, each one broadcasting the same simple message. Sanctuary acknowledged. En route to assist, they came from everywhere. Military vessels from the patrol fleets. Colony ships pressed into emergency service. Private merchant vessels armed with whatever weapons their owners could mount. Even aging warships from humanity's pre-contact days, pulled out of mothballs and crewed by veterans who couldn't ignore the call. They came from Mars and Luna, from the Centauri colonies and the mining stations of the Belt. They came because a ship had called for sanctuary, and humanity had decided long ago that such calls would never go unanswered. At the head of this unlikely armada was the HSMS Defiance, a heavy cruiser that served as the flagship of Admiral Marcus Webb's Rapid Response Fleet. The Admiral's face appeared on Sarah's viewscreen, stern but with a hint of pride in his eyes. Commander Chen, this is Admiral Webb. I believe you called for reinforcements. Sarah felt a laugh bubble up despite everything, relief and disbelief mixing into something close to hysteria. Admiral, your timing is impeccable. We've been pushing our engines past safe limits for the past 19 hours, Commander. Half my fleet will need complete overhauls after this, but that's a problem for another day. Right now, let's show these Kragath what happens when they threaten people under human protection. The Kragath fleet, which had seemed so overwhelming mere moments ago, now found itself facing a force 3 times its size. Overlord Thrax's confident sneer had vanished, replaced by cold calculation. He had heard the stories about humans, about their tendency to respond to threats with overwhelming force, but he had dismissed such tales as exaggeration. He would not make that mistake again. Admiral Webb's voice rang out across all frequencies, addressing both the Kragath fleet and the gathered human vessels. This is Admiral Marcus Webb of the Human Alliance Defense Fleet. I hereby declare this region under human protection. The Valine refugees are now under our direct care. Any hostile action against them or against human vessels will result in immediate and total response. Kragath forces, you have one opportunity to withdraw. I suggest you take it. For a long moment, no one moved. 2 fleets faced each other across the void, weapons hot, shields raised, waiting to see who would blink first. Then slowly, deliberately, Overlord Thrax's dreadnought began to turn away. One by one, the Kragath vessels followed, their formation breaking as they retreated back to faster-than-light travel. They were predators, and predators understood when prey had become too dangerous to hunt. As the last Kragath ship vanished, a cheer erupted across the human fleet. Ships flashed their running lights in celebration. Crews who had expected to fight instead found themselves victorious without firing a shot, beyond those initial desperate exchanges. On the horizon's edge, Sarah's crew embraced each other, tears mixing with laughter. They had held the line. They had protected the helpless. They had done what they set out to do. Ambassador Krell's image reappeared on the view screen, his luminescent form pulsing with colors that Dr. Morrison's database identified as profound gratitude and joy. Commander Chen, Admiral Webb, there are no words in our language for what you have done. You saved us. Your species saved us even though it cost you nothing to turn away. Admiral Webb's expression softened. Ambassador, where we come from, we have a saying. The only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. Your people needed help. We're just glad we could provide it, Sarah added quietly. Welcome to human space, Ambassador. We'll make sure you and your people find a new home. As medical teams began coordinating aid for the Valine refugees, as the fleet reorganized into a protective escort formation, and as messages flooded in from across human space offering supplies, shelter, and support, Sarah stood at her viewport and looked out at the stars. They seemed brighter somehow, as if the universe itself approved of what had happened here. Humanity had taken a stand not for territory or resources, but for principle. They had risked war with a powerful empire to save strangers who could offer nothing in return. It was illogical by the cold calculations of galactic politics, inefficient by the standards of older civilizations, but it was human. And in that moment, as word of the encounter began to spread across the galaxy, other species started to understand something important about these relative newcomers to the cosmic stage. Humanity might be young, might be reckless, might be frustratingly unwilling to accept the status quo. But when the darkness came, when evil threatened, when the helpless cried out for aid, humanity would answer. Always. When Earth answers, the rescue of the Valine refugees sent shockwaves through the Galactic Council chambers. What had begun as a simple distress call had transformed into a political earthquake that threatened to reshape the balance of power across known space. The ancient species that dominated the Council found themselves facing an uncomfortable reality. Humanity, the newcomers they had dismissed as inconsequential, had just accomplished something none of them had dared attempt in centuries. 3 weeks after the confrontation with the Kragath fleet, Commander Sarah Chen stood before the Council itself. The chamber was enormous, a circular structure that seemed to stretch toward infinity, with representatives from hundreds of species arrayed in tiers that rose into shadows. At the center, where she stood alone, a single platform hovered, bathed in harsh white light that made her feel exposed and vulnerable. Counselor Vex, the crystalline being who had ordered her to ignore the Valine distress call, spoke first. His translated voice echoed through the chamber with cold authority. Commander Chen, you stand accused of violating direct council orders, of initiating unauthorized military action, and of potentially provoking war with the Kragath Empire. How do you answer these charges? Sarah met his gaze steadily, refusing to be intimidated by the spectacle around her. I answer that I saved 30,000 lives that your council deemed not worth saving. If that's a crime, then I'm guilty as charged. A murmur rippled through the assembled delegates. Some species transmitted their disapproval through color changes or scent markers. Others vocalized their discontent in languages the translation system struggled to render. But Sarah also noticed something else. Some representatives remained silent, watching with what might have been approval or perhaps curiosity. Another counselor spoke. This one a flowing mass of bioluminescent tentacles suspended in a containment field. You do not understand the complexities of galactic politics, human. The Kregath Empire controls 17 sectors. They possess military might that could devastate entire regions. By interfering with their conquest of the Valine, you have made an enemy of a power that your species cannot hope to defeat. With respect, Counselor, Sarah replied, her voice carrying throughout the chamber, I understand perfectly. You're afraid. You've all grown so comfortable in your ancient civilizations, so wrapped up in your treaties and protocols that you've forgotten what it means to stand for something. The Kregath weren't strong because of their military. They were strong because no one had the courage to tell them no. The chamber erupted in outrage. Representatives shouted protests in dozens of languages. Councillor Vex raised appendages for silence, his crystalline structure pulsing with barely contained anger. You dare lecture this council? Civilizations represented here were building star-spanning empires when your ancestors were still living in caves. And yet, Sarah said quietly, it took humans to save the Valine. Where were your ancient civilizations when children were dying? Where was your wisdom when refugees begged for sanctuary? Before anyone could respond, a new voice cut through the chaos. It was deep and resonant, carrying an authority that silenced even the most vocal protesters. The human speaks truth, though it pains us to hear it. All attention turned to a section of the chamber where representatives of the Thraxian collective sat. The Thrax were an old species, respected throughout the galaxy for their diplomatic skill and moral philosophy. When they spoke, others listened. The Thrax representative, Ambassador Kelvin, continued, 50 cycles ago, my own people faced extinction. A plague consumed our worlds and we called for aid. The council debated. They formed committees. They calculated costs and benefits. While they deliberated, millions of my people died. He paused, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the chamber's light. It was a newly contacted species, the Yanari, who answered our call. They were primitive by council standards, but they possessed something we had lost, the willingness to act when action was needed. They saved us just as the humans saved the Valine. Councillor Vex's structure dimmed slightly, a sign of discomfort in his species. Ambassador Kelvin, this is not about whether the Valine deserved rescue. This is about protocol, about maintaining the stability that has kept the galaxy at relative peace for millennia. Peace built on the graves of those deemed inconvenient, Sarah interjected. That's not peace. That's just organized apathy. The debate raged for hours. Some council members demanded severe sanctions against humanity, even expulsion from the galactic community. Others argued for understanding, suggesting that humanity's actions, while irregular, had ultimately prevented a tragedy. A few remained conspicuously silent, their thoughts hidden behind alien expressions that defied interpretation. Finally, as the debate seemed about to dissolve into chaos, the council's oldest member spoke. The Eternal Watcher, a being of pure energy contained within a geometric prison of light, rarely involved itself in council affairs. Its intervention now silenced every other voice. Humanity has reminded us of something we have forgotten. The Watcher's voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. They have shown us that laws and protocols, while necessary, must never become more important than the lives they are meant to protect. Commander Sarah Chen, you violated our orders, but you upheld a higher law, the obligation to help those who cannot help themselves. The chamber fell absolutely silent. The Eternal Watcher's pronouncements were rare and considered binding by ancient tradition. The Council will not punish Commander Chen or the human species for their actions. Instead, we shall examine our own protocols and ask ourselves when we became so cautious that we forgot to be compassionate. This session is adjourned. As the representatives filed out, many avoiding Sarah's gaze while others nodded respectfully, she felt exhaustion wash over her. The political battle was over, but she knew the real work was just beginning. Meanwhile, in human space, the rescued Valine refugees were beginning their new lives. Admiral Marcus Webb had coordinated with colonial authorities to find temporary housing for the 30,000 survivors on 3 different human worlds. The response from human populations had been overwhelming. Donations of food, clothing, medical supplies, and offers of housing flooded in faster than aid organizations could process them. On the colony world of New Terra, Ambassador Krell stood in what would become the first Valine settlement. Around him, his people worked alongside human volunteers to construct buildings, establish agricultural zones, and create the infrastructure needed for permanent habitation. Children, both human and Valine, played together in areas cleared for recreation, their laughter a sound Krell had feared he would never hear again. Dr. James Morrison approached, carrying a data pad and wearing the expression of someone about to deliver complicated news. Ambassador, I've completed the cultural integration assessment you requested. I think you should see this. Krell's luminescent form shifted colors, indicating curiosity. What have you discovered, Doctor? Your species and ours are remarkably compatible. Your dietary needs can be met with minor modifications to our existing food supplies. Your environmental preferences align closely with Earth normal conditions. Even your social structures parallel some human civilizations. Morrison paused, choosing his next words carefully. But there's something else, something I didn't expect to find. Please, speak freely. Your people's biological structure contains markers suggesting you were genetically modified, probably millions of years ago. Someone designed you to be peaceful, to be incapable of violence even in self-defense. It's why you couldn't fight back against the Kragath. Krell's colors dimmed, a sign of sadness. We have always known this, Doctor. Our creators, whoever they were, sought to make a perfect, peaceful species. Instead, they made us vulnerable. That's where you're wrong, Morrison said gently. They made you different. Humanity has spent our entire history fighting wars, learning to kill more efficiently. We're good at violence because we've had to be. But you represent something we've always aspired to. A species that has transcended the need for conflict. You're not weak, Ambassador. You're evolved beyond what we are. Yet we needed your violence to survive. And we need your peace to remember why survival matters. Don't you see? We complement each other. Humanity can protect, but we forget sometimes why we're protecting. Your people can teach us the value of what we're defending. The conversation was interrupted by shouts of alarm from the construction site. Morrison and Krell ran toward the commotion, arriving to find a crowd gathered around a view screen showing a news broadcast. The image displayed was instantly recognizable. The Kragath homeworld, its capital city visible from orbit. But something was wrong. The city was burning. The news anchor, a human woman broadcasting from a distant relay station, spoke with barely contained shock. Reports are still coming in, but it appears the Kragath Empire has suffered a massive internal revolt. Subject species across 17 sectors have risen simultaneously against their Kragath overlords. Military analysts believe the rebellion was inspired by humanity's defense of the Valine refugees. Morrison stared at the screen in disbelief. By all that's holy. Krell's colors swirled in patterns Morrison had learned indicated profound emotion. What have we done? What needed to be done? Said a new voice. Admiral Webb approached, his uniform bearing signs of hasty travel. I came as soon as I heard. Ambassador, Doctor, we need to talk about what happens next. They moved to a private area where Webb could speak freely. His expression was grave. The Kragath Empire is collapsing. 63 different species have declared independence in the past 48 hours. The Kragath military is fracturing as subject species conscripts turn on their masters. It's chaos and it's spreading. This was never our intention, Krell said softly. We only sought to escape, not to cause a galactic upheaval. Webb shook his head. The upheaval was inevitable. The Kragath Empire was built on oppression and fear. It only took someone standing up to them to show others it was possible. You didn't cause this, Ambassador. You were just the spark that lit a fire that was waiting to burn. What does the Council say? Morrison asked. The Council is divided. Half want humanity to help stabilize the situation. The other half blame us for destabilizing it in the first place. Meanwhile, we're getting distress calls from a dozen different systems where the fighting is worst. Morrison felt his stomach sink. They're going to ask us to intervene again, aren't they? They already are. And the thing is... Webb paused, looking out at the Valine settlement where humans and refugees worked side by side. I'm not sure we can say no. Back on Earth, In the headquarters of the Human Alliance Defense Fleet, military planners were already assembling response scenarios. The collapse of the Kragath Empire had created a power vacuum that threatened to plunge 17 sectors into perpetual warfare. Species that had been enemies before the Kragath conquered them were now free to resume old conflicts. Without a stabilizing force, millions would die. Fleet Admiral Catherine Zhang stood before a holographic map of the affected region. Her staff assembled around her. Opinions? A young tactical officer spoke first. Admiral, we can't police 17 sectors. We don't have the ships or the personnel. Then we don't police them, Zhang replied. We do what we're good at. We protect those who can't protect themselves, and we help those who want to help themselves. Captain Rodriguez, your thoughts? Rodriguez, a veteran of the Mars Colony Defense Force, stepped forward. We establish safe zones in the most contested regions. We offer humanitarian aid and protection to civilian populations. We help facilitate peace talks between warring factions. And most importantly, we make it clear that we're not there to conquer or control. We're there to give people time to figure out their own futures. And if they can't figure it out, someone asked, then at least we gave them the chance. That's more than the Council was willing to do. The decision was made. Operation Steady Hand would deploy human forces across the former Kragath Empire, not as conquerors but as peacekeepers. It was an ambitious plan, perhaps an impossible one, but it was undeniably human in its optimistic audacity. 6 months later, the results were mixed but promising. Human peacekeeping forces had established stability in 8 of the most troubled sectors. 3 more regions had descended into conflict too complex for outside intervention. The remaining sectors had formed their own coalitions, with varying degrees of success. The Galactic Council watched with a mixture of admiration and concern as humanity demonstrated a capacity for military deployment that few had suspected they possessed. Human fleets seemed to be everywhere at once, responding to crises with a speed that older, more bureaucratic civilizations could not match. But the greatest change came not from military action, but from something far simpler. Human aid workers, doctors, engineers, and teachers spread throughout the affected regions. They built schools and hospitals, repaired infrastructure, and taught skills that would help newly independent species rebuild their civilizations. Everywhere they went, they brought not just supplies but hope. The Valine, inspired by the example of their rescuers, began to play a crucial role in this recovery. Their natural, peaceful disposition made them ideal mediators in conflicts where human presence might be seen as militarily threatening. Valine diplomats, protected by human security forces, helped broker peace agreements between species that had been enemies for generations. Ambassador Krell found himself in an unexpected position, spokesperson for a growing coalition of species that had decided to model their recovery on the principles humanity had demonstrated. They called themselves the Alliance of Free Peoples, and their founding document was simple. No species would stand alone against aggression, and none would ignore calls for help from the helpless. 1 year after the rescue, Sarah Chen returned to the Pelion Nebula. The debris field was still there, a memorial to those Valine who had not survived the exodus from their home world. But surrounding it now was something new. A space station, jointly built by humans and Valine, serving as headquarters for the Alliance of Free Peoples. Sarah floated in her spacesuit outside the station, looking at the memorial. Ambassador Krell's voice came through her comm system. You honor us with your presence, Commander. Or should I say, Admiral? Sarah smiled at the promotion she still wasn't quite comfortable with. Admiral in title only, Ambassador. I still think of myself as a ship captain who got lucky. Lucky? Krell's luminescent form appeared beside her, his own spacesuit translucent to accommodate his unique biology. Is that what humans call it when they risk everything for strangers? We call it doing the right thing, which admittedly doesn't always feel lucky while it's happening. They floated in companionable silence for a moment, 2 beings from different worlds united by shared experience and mutual respect. Finally, Krell spoke again. Admiral, there is something I must tell you. We have received intelligence from our people who are working in the former Kragath territories. There are rumors of other species, enslaved populations we did not know existed, hidden in sectors the Kragath kept secret even from the Council. Sarah felt her pulse quicken. How many? We do not know. Potentially millions. They are calling for help. but they are far from any established routes. The journey would be dangerous, and the Council has refused to authorize exploration missions. Sarah looked at him, seeing in his luminescent patterns the same hope and determination that had driven her to answer the original Valine distress call. Ambassador, I think I know where this is going. We have a ship prepared. It is small but fast, and we have the coordinates. Let me guess. You need someone foolish enough to investigate an unknown region of space based on rumors and intelligence from former slaves of a collapsed empire? Krell's colors shifted in the pattern Sarah had learned, indicated amusement. I would not have phrased it quite so bluntly, but yes. We need someone who understands that sometimes the regulations must be ignored in favor of what is right. Sarah laughed, the sound echoing in her helmet. You know, a year ago I was a simple exploration vessel captain. Now I'm apparently making a career out of rescuing people the galaxy thinks aren't worth saving. Is that a yes, Admiral? She looked out at the stars, at the vast unexplored darkness that held so many secrets, so many potential calls for help waiting to be answered. She thought about the crew of the Horizon's Edge, many of whom had requested transfers to her new command. She thought about the principles that had guided humanity's response to the Valine crisis, principles that had changed the political landscape of the galaxy. Most of all, she thought about those potential millions waiting in darkness, hoping for a miracle they had no right to expect. When do we leave? She asked. The mission launched 3 days later. This time Sarah commanded not one ship but a small fleet, the Horizon's Edge now upgraded and rearmed, along with 2 Valine diplomatic vessels and a human medical frigate. They carried supplies for an extended mission, translators fluent in hundreds of languages, and a crew that understood the risks they were taking. As they prepared to jump to faster-than-light travel, Sarah received a transmission from Admiral Webb. His face appeared on her view screen, showing the tired but proud expression of a commander watching his protege exceed expectations. Admiral Chen, your orders are simple. Investigate the rumors, assess the situation, and report back. Do not engage superior forces. Do not make promises we can't keep. And for the love of all that's holy, try not to start another galactic incident. Sarah grinned. No promises on that last one, sir. I know. That's why I'm sending you. Good luck, Admiral. And remember, humanity is watching. Make us proud. The transmission ended and Sarah turned to her crew. They looked back at her with expressions ranging from excitement to apprehension, but all showing the same underlying determination that had defined humanity's response to every crisis they had faced. All stations, prepare for jump, she ordered. Let's go see who else needs our help. The ships vanished in a flash of blue light, leaving behind only the fading traces of their passage. In the council chambers, observers noted their departure and wondered what consequences would follow. Some predicted disaster, others hoped for another miracle. But among the newer members of the Galactic Council, among the species that had been rescued or liberated or simply given hope by humanity's actions, there was a different sentiment. They did not wonder what would happen. They knew, somewhere in the darkness, people were suffering. People were calling for help. People had been abandoned by those who should have protected them, and humanity had heard. In the depths of the former Kragath territories, in hidden facilities and secret stations, beings that had lived their entire lives in slavery felt something they had never experienced before. The ventilation systems carried whispers. The communication networks hummed with rumors, and the darkness itself seemed to lighten with possibility. The humans were coming. The species that built empires on the suffering of others began to feel the first stirrings of fear. The ancient civilizations that had maintained order through careful calculation started to reconsider their assumptions. And the helpless, the enslaved, the forgotten began to hope, because they had learned something the galaxy was only beginning to understand. When someone called for help, when someone stood at the edge of darkness and sent out a desperate plea into the void, there was a species out there that would answer. They were young and reckless. They were primitive by the standards of ancient civilizations. They had barely begun to explore their corner of the galaxy, but they were human. And humans, for all their flaws and contradictions, had brought something into the cosmos that had been missing for far too long. The simple, powerful belief that some things mattered more than politics or convenience or even survival itself. They had brought the conviction that when someone needed help, you helped them, not because it was profitable, not because it was safe, not because it advanced your interests or secured your position, You helped because it was right. As Sarah Chen's fleet disappeared into the unknown regions of space, as the Valine settlement on New Terra celebrated another day of freedom, as the alliance of free peoples grew stronger with each passing cycle, the galaxy began to change in ways that would echo for generations. The age of careful neutrality was ending. The age of humanity had begun. And across the stars, in darkness and light, in slavery and freedom, in despair and hope, beings of 1,000 different species were learning the same lesson. When Earth answers, everything changes.